Welcome to the Connect with BMC Helix ITSM and Remedy webinar. For this topic this month, it will be on performance considerations for smart IT. And our presenters today will be Deodatta and Nancy. And at this time, I will turn it over to Deo to take us through the content.
Thank you, Greg. Myself, Deodatta Marathe. I'm working with BMC for 10 years now, and I have been many years of experience with BMC Remedy application development. I've been involved in smart IT application development from its inception time. So today's topic is to cover performance consideration for smart IT. So me and my colleague Nancy will be covering these topics. Moving on to the agenda, so we have a couple of performance areas. We are going to cover those. For example, Smart ID dashboard, ticket console, chunking related implementation, FTS, which is full text search, then troubleshooting DB performance, data purging and archiving. And then there are a couple of new improvements which we introduced in new release. We are going to cover all those. Okay, so to start with an overview of this presentation, so we are going to review the smart ID design around the performance areas, like why the performance issues are coming now, and what is the design around it, and how can we troubleshoot, or how can we fine tune those areas to behave accordingly, and then there are a couple of overall generic performance troubleshooting steps that we are going to cover, which involves DB level troubleshooting as well as fine tuning. So that topics are actually split into two sections. One is for smart ID application centric areas, like for example, the dashboard and ticket console. So all these are very specific to smart ID application, and we are going to cover that separately. And then couple of tuning required at DB level, or the configuration or indexes at DB, and which is generically covering AR system fine tuning practices. So that is the second part, second section we are going to cover. Okay, so to start with smart IT dashboard performance improvement. So basically, if you remember, in 2.0, Smart ID version 2.0, we used to have a MongoDB. We used to have a dependency on MongoDB to fetch all the social related data, and in the dashboard that data is being shown directly fetching it from Mongo. But when we moved on 18.05 version onwards, we actually get rid of Mongo. So if you notice the upgrade steps, you will see that there are a couple of migration activities been involved, and one of the migration is from Mongo to the normal forms. So basically, the data which we used to store into the MongoDB. So the data includes the work notes as well as system events. So that data used to show on the dashboard as well as on the timeline of a ticket. So now when we upgrade to 18.05, that data is no longer coming from Mongo, and that is actually only coming through normal AR forms. So because of that transition, or because of that migration, there are a couple of issues got involved in terms of performance. So I'm going to cover that, and so one of the form that we introduced is SMT:social follow config form. So this form is responsible for storing the data of the follow. For example, an end user is following a certain ticket, or an agent who logs into Smart ID, when he creates an incident, he automatically follows that incident. So when he follows that incident, what is meant by that? So when we say he follows that incident, it means that he actually starts seeing all the updates of that incident. And when we say that he starts seeing updates, he starts seeing updates on the dashboard for that user. So how we achieve that, right? So basically, there is an entry created on the social follow config form, and what we do is when you create an entry on the social follow config form, when you want to show the data into dashboard, you actually query that follow config form and find out how many tickets that user is following. So you will get a list of tickets, and then what you do is you just create an in clause qualification on the work log view form. So what is this work log view form, right? So there is a form called SMT social work log view, which is nothing but a union of all the work logs. So rather be it incident work log or work order work log or change work log or problem work log or service request work log. So this is just a union of all the work log forms, and what is the intention of doing that, right? So the intention is to get all the consolidated list of work log within a one call, right? So when I want to show something on a dashboard, for example, I'm not really interested to only show incident or work order. I should be able to see all the updates on any of the tickets, right? So how can I achieve that? If I want to show all the data from all the tickets, all the workload from all the tickets, or all the events from all the tickets, then I have to have a query on a union or on a join, right? So this is kind of a union which enables us to fetch all the data, all the workload related data, and we actually query on that data. So the first thing is follow config form, which stores the user ID and the ticket relationship. And second is the work log view, which allows us to fetch all the data about work logs. And there is also something called social events, right? So previously we used to generate the events at the ITSM workflows, and we used to push it to MongoDB. Now that those events are pushed into a separate form called SMT:social events. So this form stores the data for all the tickets, and this data also consists of the events. For example, an event like a new ticket got created, or an assignment change happened, or maybe a status change happened, like that. So these events are stored into social events form, and so this form is also queried whenever we want to show any updates on dashboard, right? So there are three things involved here, right? So one is you are searching on work log view. Another thing is you are searching on social events, and there are other things like broadcasts, etc. So if there are broadcasts present, then we already have a form called CFG broadcast. We query that form. So now when we moved away from MongoDB and moved on to the regular AR forms, we have seen a couple of issues with respect to the number of data that we are dealing with, right? So there are a couple of limitations with respect to specific DBs. For example, Oracle has a limitation of having only handling only 1,000 literals. So in clause, what it means is in Oracle I cannot have like more than 1,000 parameters in an in clause. So basically to avoid all that situation, all that errors from the DB, what we have done is we have implemented a solution in AR where there is a configuration present, which is called temp table threshold. So this configuration allows us uh, to pass on the number of elements or number of literals in clause, but AR can actually consider to generate a temp table instead of generating an in clause. So what it means, right? So it means that instead of generating in clause or an or query, AR internally creates a temp table with all that data. Like for example, if you are searching, if a user is following like 1,000 tickets or more than 1,000 tickets, for example 1,200 tickets, for example, right? And we know that okay, for 1,000 literals we have an issue where or clause cannot take more than 1,000 literals in clause, right? So sorry, Oracle cannot take it more than 1,000 literals in clause. So So temp table threshold actually helps us in terms of determining what is my threshold. So I say like, okay, 900 is my threshold. So whenever there is a in clause or in qualification getting generated at AR level, which are having more than 900 in parameters, AR will automatically creates a temp table in memory. So what is the temp table? So instead of going to database with the in clause or with the or condition with 1000 literals, AR internally creates a temp table and insert all those 1200 items in the temp table, and it creates a join with your target form. So for example, if you are searching on work log view, then what it does is it inserts 1200 records into a temp table and creates a join of those 1200 record uh, data from the temp table with a SMT work log view form. So what it gives us back is the same results that you can get it from in clause, because it's a join. It's a inner join with the target form between the temp table and the target form, and it gives the same result that is required from the in clause. So that is something like which is a tuning parameter for us. Like if you have more than 1200 records in follow config, then yes, you have to have that parameter set as 900, which can decide like, okay, I should be creating a temp table instead of generating an in clause. Okay, so this is something which is very technical, like in terms of, we are considering that, okay, the user will be following a lot many tickets and all. Okay, but there are a couple of patterns that we also identified, like there are wrong patterns in terms of, when people are following those many tickets. So we have seen a couple of customer cases where, the patterns are like this. For example, there are users which are following tickets. Those are not really end users. Those are really just a system users. For example, remedy application service or any automation system users, which are just there because those automation system creates a ticket with that username. So now, because you have workflows which are capturing that user details, who are creating that incident and automatically following those tickets, all these users like remedy application service or AR escalator or maybe some kind of a monitoring tool user, so that user starts following the data. So we also need to find that kind of pattern and see how can I disable creating follow config records for such users. We have taken care of couple of out of the box users, system users, for example, remedy application service and AR escalators. So if you refer the social related forms, so if you go to filters and search for social forms, social workflows, you will see that couple of social workflows not really generates an events for the users like AR escalator or remedy application services. So these we no longer creates follow tickets for those users. So what will happen if I create follow tickets for those users, right? It's unnecessarily will create huge amount of data for those users, and we know that these users are never gonna log into smart ID and will be referring to the dashboard for their updates. So better is to avoid creating the records for those users in follow config form, and we can actually refer the workflows and find out if there are such workflows which generates the data for follow config for such users. We can actually add the exception in that in those workflows and see if we can deal with that. Another pattern that we have seen with a lot more customers is the shared resources. For example, we have seen the agents are sharing their credentials to work together. Like, for example, there is a common user getting created, and this user actually, this user is used by actually more than 10 to 15 end users, and whenever a record gets created for follow config for this user, this is not really a realistic data, right? For example, if there is a user who is working on behalf of like 10 users, obviously he's gonna get that many follow config records, and we have seen in customer cases some pattern where this is the user who gets assigned every ticket whenever whenever the ticket gets created. So there is automation in place where the whenever incident gets created, this user is an assignee. So whenever that user is assignee, the smart AD workflows kicks in, and that creates a follow config record for that user. However, realistically, this user, I'm not sure, means this can be a debatable point that if this user is really interested into seeing the dashboard updates or not, because this user is not really an actual user. This is a shared resource which is getting used to getting used to track the assignment, or do the auto assignment of the ticket, and this is really a process oriented thing. So this is something we should also check if this can be avoided, means or otherwise you can also include this user as a exception in terms of generating follow config record. So that is something like the pattern that we have seen so far with while working with customers. Okay, so there are a couple of like what we discussed, right? So there are a couple of recommendations that we have proposed. Like we have to first correct the data. So for example, so this is the query that we are given. Like this query can list you down all the data which is getting followed by every user. So this will give you the number of tickets which are followed by the users, and we can actually see how many of the users are top contributors, like how many of the users are really following huge number of tickets, and then we can decide like are these users are realistically the users which are really working on the smarter dashboard, or these users are only contributing in terms of process of the assignment or the ticket generation. Then we have some recommendations to have lower follow tickets and like less than 1,000 tickets. So this 1,000 number is came because we have the limitation of in clause in Oracle case where only 1,000 liters are supported. So it's better to not to go into that temp table creation mode. Instead of going through the temp table creation, if we can just have less than 1,000 tickets followed, then it will be better to it will be better to get the data directly from database instead of going through that temp table generation. Okay, so another thing that we have seen is after the migration from 2.0 to 18.05, there are a couple of old records. For example, if you refer the 18.05 version of Smart IT, there is no archiving enabled for the forms, as well as there is no cleanup mechanism present. So what happened is when the data got migrated from follow config from Mongo to follow config form, that also consist of the data, the tickets which are no longer enabled, or those are no longer open. So there are a couple of incidents which an end user is following. Those incidents are in closed status, or there are a couple of other tickets, for example, work order or change, which are already in cancelled state, or either in completed or closed state. So those records actually are contributing to the overall performance issues, and we have a couple of knowledge articles around them, like how we can clean up those records. In the latest versions, you can see there are archiving enabled for these forms, so we have taken care of these issues going forward in the latest release. But in the old releases, we have given a knowledge article which can help in terms of cleaning up the old data or the close records from the social follow config form only. Okay, so when I refer the the workflows which needs to be modified, for example, for the integration users and all, you can actually search for the filters with the social keyword, and you will find all the workflows which are executed for social, and you can actually see if there are any push fields happening on the social follow config form. Those are the possible candidate to look into if that those workflow needs to be executed for the integration users or not. In the latest release, we have also introduced a CCS parameter called landing page. So what this enables is so this is kind of an enhancement which can also help us in terms of getting rid of performance issues on dashboard. For example, if you have a capability to to choose the landing page. For example, when you log into SmartID, if you directly want to go to ticket console and don't want to go to the dashboard, then you can actually choose to define what is the landing page that you want to go in, like in the CCS parameter or centralized configuration. You can put in the landing page, and the options are dashboard, ticket console, or smart recorder. Based on the configuration, your smart IT will load the required page. Like if you configured for ticket console, it will directly take you to the ticket console and not the dashboard. So if we can avoid the dashboard calls, that can also we can say as a performance improvement, because we are no longer making the dashboard calls or the social feed calls. So that also can be an improvement in terms of the capability or to handling the performance issues. Moving on to the another topic, is about the stats call. So if you have seen the screen, right? So these are the stats call, which is the incident backlog and the open incident, similar for the work orders. So basically, these are the stats which for which we query specifically. So there are a couple of call been initiated for the stats when a user logs in into SmartIT and go to the dashboard. And So basically there are a couple of options, like there are all groups as well as there is a specific group. So whenever stats call is initiated, it also represents the group to which you are looking for to get stats for. Like if you have on the top right hand side corner, there is a company name and the groups that you can select. So if you select a certain specific group to which you are interested in, the stats call will give you an accurate information of that particular group. If you are choosing a all groups option over there, it may depends on the number of groups you are part of, and the stats call may take some time. Overall, this stats call from the AR point of view itself is a heavy call, because it just do a count star call to the database. So this is a heavy call in terms of AR. In the latest versions, we have introduced couple of a couple of performance tuning parameters. So you can refer these the document of 1908 version, where you can see the database indexes that are proposed to handle the better handling of stats call. Another thing that we have seen while executing stats call is the number of time. As I said, like if you are part of huge many groups, or you have access to many company records, then overall the stats execution are depend on the RLS query. So if you refer the database query which gets generated for the stats call, you will notice that the actual qualification of the generated by application is not really responsible for getting the slow response. The actual uh, uh, reason for being a slow in terms of execution is the row level security, which is a filtering that happened on top of the extracted record to filter it based on the permission model or the row level security that an application or the user is having. So there are a couple of improvements that has been done at AR level, where we have introduced and a new RLS algorithm. So this new RLS algorithm can also contribute in large in terms of improving the performance issue. If you want to refer this, it's available in the documentation. So this new RLS algorithm is needs to be enabled on the base forms to make sure that the new RLS algorithm will be applied whenever search is been issued on this form. And once the new RLS algorithm is issued, we have seen a tremendous amount of performance issues getting resolved because the new RLS algorithm uses a subquery instead of directly going with the OR clause condition. Um, so that is something from the backlog statistic point of view. Another improvement I'm going to talk about is about ticket console improvement. And if you notice, ticket console is again a union, so which enables us to see all the data for the or from all the tickets, and you can actually filter based on those data. So we have seen a couple of time that customers are issuing a query which are not realistic. Like they issue the query saying I want to see all open tickets without having any criteria, and the system can have as many of million open tickets in the system. So what we have come up with is a default filtering of dates. For example, in the latest versions, you'll see this parameter. You'll see this parameters a filter present over here, that by default, whenever you are searching for any and when you are generating any query on ticket console, it will always have a cap of 30 days. So it will always say, show me the latest 30 days data. But if you want to see more than that, you can actually always apply a date filter on top of ticket console. And by saying date filter, it means a submit date filter, which allows you to drill down to as many of days that you want, that you're interested in. For example, if you're not really interested to see only one month data, and you want to see like last 6 months data, it will be a deliberate action on terms of in terms of searching that big of data, and that will take some time. But most of the time, like whenever user hits on ticket console, they expect the data shown to be very quick. And this is one of the way that we thought, like, okay, maybe customer is not really interested into seeing older data, and so that's the reason we are by default fetching only 30 days data in the query. Yeah, so now this is also configurable. Like if you really don't want to see only 30 days data and you want to configure it for 60 days, you can actually see you have a CCS configuration present, which restricts console result for no number of days. You can mention like how many number of days you want to configure there. Like you can say 30 days or 60 days or 90 days, but you have to make sure that it also impacts performance whenever user hits the query. It is gonna fetch all that amount of data back to the end user again. So this is also like, I'm not saying that there are no issues in terms of no issues in terms of indexing and all. So I'm considering that those issues are already resolved. Like all the indexes are coming in picture from the base forms, and everything looks good from the database side. I'm just talking from the amount of data that we are fetching, right? So, so that is something that we have to always think in terms of the number of data that we have, and then only consider this configuration to be in place. Another thing that we have seen is the stats. So the stats on the top, the like my tickets, critical tickets, new tickets, open tickets. So these are stats also which contributes a lot in terms of getting the results. So this is also configurable. Like if you want to have it explicitly visible, then you can configure the CCS configuration to explicitly stat refresh true or false. It enables you to not fetching stats always, and it will just display the regular data for you on ticket console. And if you want to see the stats, there will be a button on top, and clicking on it, which will invoke the stats call and fetch you all the details of the current stats of those ticket. that are visible under ticket console. Again, so as I said, that there are couple of DB level indexes proposed for this for the ticket console to perform better. So you can find the link for the data, Smart IT documentation here. Okay, another thing that we have improved in from compared to old release and the new release is the chunking. So if you really refer it from the API calls point of view, which are made from Smart IT to AR. So whenever we are fetching a number of records, right? For example, there is a drop down. For example, the drop down is product category tier 1, for example, right? So if I want to search all the category tier 1 data, what I will be showing is a API call which fetches the data, and there is also a parameter called n matches in the API, in AR API, which also allows me to bring in the total number of records that you are returning, means that AR is returning. So what AR internally does is whenever I issue a get entry call or get list entry call, it internally issues a count star call as well in parallel with the get data call. So what that call means is it's an add-on, right? It's not really required. So while showing the category, if I'm not really interested to see the amount of data that I'm getting from the AR, I can actually avoid that by saying n match is equal to 0 or n match is equal to null. So so that is what exactly we have done in the chunking story, where all such places where we are invoking an AR API or where we are invoking a AR call to get the list, and we are not really interested to see how many records we are fetching. We are actually just pass on the max retrieve plus 1 so that I can get. So when I'm say chunking, it says okay. When I'm expecting AR to return only top 80 records, I'm asking AR to give me 81 records so that I know that there are more records than 80, right? So that way I can find out, okay, there are more records than 80, and client will be notified to allow to search more than 80 characters to the from the AR. So if you refer the new version, you will see that the search automatically switches to the new implementation, where any keyword search that you invoke from SmartIT results into AR query, and you will get the exact number of records that you are interested in. So that is something that improves a lot in terms of performance, because in the older version, for any call we used to invoke from SmartIT, it was always like multiplied by 2, because we internally used to invoke count star calls as well. But having this story implemented in the latest version, that gives a lot of improvements in terms of number of calls we are issuing from SmartIT to AR. Okay, I'll be handing over to Nancy for further topics. Nancy, so over to you.
Thank you, Dio. My name is Nancy Lane. I'm a principal product developer focusing on performance area and customer escalation. Next, we'll be talking about FTS. The full text research is a feature of the AR server that enables faster searches when the searches are performed on FTS-enabled fields of a given AR form. In contrast to the standard character-based search function available in the database, FTS is a word-based search, thus providing faster results when searching for words or phrases. FTS offers several benefits over database, such as fast index searches for club fields, searching within attached files, word stemming, weighting search results, and more. For the knowledge articles that we see here, it will tell us how to configure FTS service in the AR server group. When configuring the FTS service for an AR server group, you need to do the following. You need to identify and rank any servers in the server group as FTS servers. More than one can be FTS servers for high availability and workload distribution purposes. One important thing to know is a running FTS service can consume a large amount of resources in terms of CPU, memory, disk space. Therefore, FTS servers are not recommended to be user-facing servers. So for the knowledge articles here, it'll show you how to configure multiple FTS searches with the load balancer, and also the troubleshooting and FTS monitoring, the key tables that you can monitor, also the error log for FTS, which is arftindx.log. Next, we'll be talking about troubleshooting database performance. So these are the tools that we'll be using to troubleshoot database performance. For Oracle databases, we use Oracle AWR, Oracle Ash Report, SQL Health Check, and for the Microsoft SQL Server, we use Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. AWR stands for Automatic Workload Repository. AWR Report collects, processes, and maintains performance statistics for problem detection and self-tuning purposes. It contains top 5 time events section, which is there's an example here. And also it gives you the SQL statistics, the top elapsed time SQL, top CPU usage SQL, top I/O usage SQL, and also it gives you the load profile. And for Oracle 12c and above, it also gives you the tuning recommendation in the bottom of the AWR report. So there are a wealth of information you can get from AWR report. This is very important when you troubleshoot your production outage, your slow performance time during the during outage time, and so it gives you an overview of your environment. It also shows a lot of the host statistics, the host CPU, host memory usage, and your Oracle database initDORA parameters value. The example shown here is the top time events. So the first section is the overall database wait event. The middle section here is the first instance. The bottom section here is the second instance. And normally if you see the wait event is called DB CPU, that can be safely ignored. That is the normal wait event. So you look at, if you see CPU, you can skip that. You look at the next one is cursor pin S wait on X. If you look at the class, the category is concurrency. That means you have a lot of concurrent transactions doing the same thing. And you look at the percentage of the database time. So for the first one, 48% is spent on CPU. That is good. So you look at you move on to the next one to see what is the top trouble area for you, which spend 13%. It's on this wait event, cursor pin wait on X. And this wait event is normally caused by share pool is undersized or under load generally. But quite frequently what we see is when your automatic statistic gathering job is running, it will cause this wait event because the statistics gathering job will invalidate the cursor in your share pool, and your cursors need to be reparsed, and therefore you'll see this wait events. Next example is for you to look at the database table. So once you see the top wait events, you will be interested in seeing what are the top sessions that are waiting on that top wait event. For example, if your database mostly is waiting on wait event TX contention, then you can go to this database table, DBA history, active sets history, basically is DBA historical ash table. You filter by the time interval that you're interested in, and you filter by the event that you're interested in, which is the wait event that we saw from the previous slide. And you can tell what are the session IDs that are waiting on this transaction and what do they do, meaning what are the SQL ID for the sessions. Then you'll be able to tell what exactly the transaction was doing that is causing all this TX database wait event. Next example, next tool that we would like to talk about is Active Session History. Active Session History Report give you more detail, more granular picture of your environment. For example, the AWR report is normally giving you hourly snapshot interval. So you'll see the hourly picture of your environment for the top transaction. But if you have production outage or you have CPU peak for 2 minutes and you're most interested in what the environment is doing during that 2 minutes, then you can use Ash report to just tell you what all your active session or what the top active sessions in your environment during that 2 minutes time. So you'll get a better picture of what the sessions are and what are they blocking, what kind of database wait event that they are causing. So Ash report is more granular than AWR report. AWR report can give you the overall environment health check, so you can understand is your environment is bottleneck on CPU or on I/O, or is basically waiting on database locks. Then you can drill down to a specific time window that you're interested in to see what are the sessions that are causing the trouble. Next, we'll talk about SQL Health Check. So you can download the SQL Health Check script. It's basically sqlhc.sql from the meta link, the doc ID that we have here. So from AWR, you identify the top trouble SQL. Then you run the SQL HC against this specific SQL ID. You'll be able to see the SQL plan for this particular SQL, and not just the SQL plan. It'll give you a wealth of information of all the background that this SQL needs to access. It'll give you all the tables and the index statistics. It'll tell you number of rows for each index, for each tables that the SQL is accessing. It'll tell you if the statistics are stale or not. It will tell you the sample size. Are you gathering statistics 100% or 10%? And it'll tell you the distinct keys. So you'll be able to tell if the index is distinctive enough for the SQL to pick up. And also you'll be able to see what kind of index type. Are they the functional index? Degree of parallelism. So a lot of all the detailed information are in one report, SQL HC, for this for one specific SQL. So normally you look at AWR, you identify say 2 or 3 top SQL, and you run SQL HC report to understand why are you getting the bad SQL plans, or is it because you just didn't gather statistics lately? Are there stale stats, or basically you're just there are just no selective index for you in the environment for the SQL to run efficiently. Next, we'll look at Microsoft SQL Server Tool. So in Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio, what you can do is you just like AWR report, it'll show you the top SQL. In the SQL Server Management Studio, you can click on the icon here on the top to the right. It'll give you the top SQLs in your environment, and you can search by top IO or top CPU. So from there, you can drill down to a specific trouble SQL that you're interested in. Then you execute the SQL to show you, click on the icon that will show you the runtime execution plan. So after you execute the SQL, it'll display the SQL plan. And from the SQL, in the SQL plan, if you right click, you can save this SQL plan in a file. Then you can upload it to the case number. So if you, and also for all these picture here, you can hover it over to the to each step here. Then you'll understand, oh, what is the cost of the SQL for this step. So normally when after you have the SQL plan, you can find the most expensive step and then drill down to understand why is this why the cost is so high, and is it because there are no selective index for this step to pick. Then you can try to tune the SQL better. Here is the snapshot for when you are clicking on the top activity icon. It'll show you you can sort the SQLs in the environment by CPU or IO, by logical read, and also by the execution time for you to identify the trouble SQL in your environment. Next, we'll be talking about data purging and archiving. A lot of time the SQL does not perform well is because there are all kinds of data pile up over the time. For example, we have SMT social follow config form and SMT social events forms. These are the common forms that we see people need to clean up. Examples to delete data from social events form. This query will delete data from SMT social events for all the tickets for which the data is archived from the parent form. Please check below with the select statement before you delete the data. So for every delete, you can try to select the data first to make sure you are cleaning up the data that you intend to. Next, we'll talk about the new release improvement. For example, you can have performance improvement by using subquery algorithm. The new subquery algorithm enables an administrator to obtain results faster from the RLS enable fields. For the row level security enable fields, if you have performance problem in your environment, you can try to utilize this new subquery algorithm in this new release. It'll help you with your performance. The next feature is we have improved the troubleshooting for middle tier session timeout, which is the 9201 error. The new functionality in Remedy mid-tier facilitates you to differentiate between all possible causes of the 9201 error. So you'll have more detailed information for just the 9201 error code. You can use the unique mid-tier instance ID, MTID, to quickly determine all possible causes of timeout errors with this error code. So these are the example for the new release improvement for you to troubleshoot the performance problem. Thank you, and I'm now handing it back to Dio. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. So here are some of the references of the knowledge articles or the documentation that we have referred in these slides, and there are a couple of solution webinar links that are provided, which happened in the past, and these are still relevant. So you can refer these in terms of in terms of when you get the slides, you will get all these all these related information along with it. So coming back to summary, so what we conclude here, right? So when we say smart ID dashboard performance, we have to clean up the follow config records and old ticket data from events. Then for backlog statistics, we have to revisit indexes, review RLS tuning algorithms, etc. Then there are a couple of CCS configuration parameters that we have that are present into smart ID, which we should refer in terms of fine tuning the performance. Then there are a couple of FTS deployment and configuration best practices shared. We have shared the troubleshooting steps for DB performance improvement, and we have also covered a couple of improvements that we have added in new release. I think that concludes the presentation, and back to you, Greg. Thank you.
Now I will take us through the closing, some self-help in contacting BMC. Our videos as well as this webinar recording are available via our YouTube channel. Once this information is posted, it is reflected in our Connect with BMC, Helix, ITSM, and Remedy schedule, available at this communities link, as well as the product support pages that contain different videos, documentation, knowledge articles, combined based on product component. A very useful resource available 24/7. And as always, our technical support methods of contact via web, phone, and email, as well as the social channels as well. Thank you.